All right, we're rolling. Hello, everybody. Tara Bachland here with the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism with another episode of the healing potential of plants for trauma. We have a number of episodes, so if I really encourage you to go back and listen to those other ones as well, because they're super. Amanda and I were just kind of reminiscing a little bit on how it's also been very healing for us. And so today we'll be talking about the healing potential of tulip poplar for trauma. And while we're talking about it, well, later I'll bring up Amanda's website. It's alchemillas.com, ALCHEMILLAS.com, and grab Amanda's book, because especially with this series, they really go hand in hand, and it's a lovely book. She goes through her trauma, but in a really beautiful way. If there is even such a thing, it is such a thing in Amanda's book, Flowers for a Girl. I recommend you get that. It reads poetically, but if you're not a poetry type of person, you can still understand it, and it's absolutely beautiful. I highly recommend it. And Amanda's also here with us at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, and I'll share a freebie where you can check out animal medicines with Amanda, Matthew Wood, and Chris as well, who co-teaches the class. Super fascinating. So, but I'll share that later. Amanda, good to see you.
It's good to see you. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited to talk about tulip poplar.
And it looks like your audio is better. Your video is getting better. You say you have storms going by, and you're actually praying for rain. So it's a good thing. But so if we have to cut out, if it gets worse, just let you know. We already are planning a part 2 anyway. So there'll be more to come. And your video just got better. Great.
Yeah, there's been some thunder rumbles, which make me very happy. But when I'm hearing them, I'm wondering how it's affecting the internet. But it's okay. Even if there's disruptions, I often consider all of it part of the medicine. Even if we have to reschedule, it's all part of it.
I agree. It's meant to be. But fortunately, we have connection right now. Tulip poplar is what your main. I mean, tulip poplar speaks to you all the time. Tell us a little bit about tulip poplar. I'm from the north, so we don't natively have it here. I guess there are a couple places, maybe like in Minneapolis and Madison, which are a little bit warmer and a bit in climate because of the city. But so, especially for those who don't know tulip poplar, tell us a little bit about it.
I should have sent you a picture before our time together. Maybe we can pull one up in the meantime. But I have some lovely ones of the leaf and the flower. I'm not a botanist, so I'm not going to speak in botanical terms. But here, the way I experience it, it's a beautiful tree, usually straight and tall. It grows very quickly. The leaves on it are very unique. I love them. Hopefully we'll find a picture of them. They look like hands and foxes' paws and bear claws and angels and fiddles and all sorts of things. There we go. And it has a really beautiful flower with a very fragrant scent. Look at it. Very sweet. It's beautiful. So here it usually blooms around May. It's usually when we'll get the blooms here where I am in the upstate of South Carolina. And then a lovely part of its medicine that we'll get to at some point in this conversation is the seed pod and the dagger that you see. Once it dries up, I'll have to send you a picture for future conversations, but look at it. It's so beautiful. And it's interesting because a lot of times people will say, well, it doesn't grow here. This isn't its zone. Which, yes, but then I've had people contact me from Canada, from London, from other places and say, Amanda, look what I found. And it's somewhere where they are, because it wants to find you. There's the dagger seed pod. They'll tell me they found the tulip poplar tree. Isn't it beautiful? So it is, it's called a tulip poplar, but it's actually part of the magnolia family, which you can probably tell by looking at some of those seed pods and the flowers. Yeah. So I don't know how much more you want me to say about it in that way, but I think the pictures are lovely. And it does speak to me all the time. And a phrase that I've started to use in the last, year or two is, I am the tree and the tree is me. And this is how I feel. Like it's the tree of my heart. And there's been some recent medicine come through that's really astounding of confirming and reinforcing the oneness of myself and the tree. So as you know, I call myself the dendrous, which is a word I made up, which means the human embodiment of the tulip poplar tree, is son or daughter of the tulip poplar tree. And one of the things that I've been hearing loudly recently is that tulip poplar is gathering her children. That's the phrase I hear. And usually don't do this till the end, but as a side, because it's appropriate at the moment, there's a Tulip Poplar Apprenticeship that I'm beginning in the fall. And the sole purpose of it is to transmit as much of this as I can, you know, to people who feel called to this tree. So it was the first tree that ever spoke to me, or that I ever spoke to when I first became curious about plant communication. I had had conversations with nettle and mullein and others, but Tulip Poplar was the first tree. And it was interesting because it's actually the state tree of Tennessee, which is where I was born, but I didn't know that. And I didn't even know what a tulip poplar was. I couldn't have even identified it, even though it's so easily identifiable, until it spoke. And I started seeing its leaves, like it was sort of beckoning to me. And I became curious about it. And it was actually in my first in-person class with Matt where I started speaking to the tree and the medicine story began. I'll stop there.
Oh, you said I'll stop there, and then I was like, oh, did her sound go out?
No, I could just, you don't understand. Like I could literally start talking and not stop for 2 hours. So I'm trying to allow you to respond.
Sounds good. I'll be aware for that. So I remember the first time that I knowingly saw tulip poplar was probably about 3 years ago. We traveled down to Missouri, and we were at this really neat, you know how they're doing so much restoration these days, right? Old buildings and converting them into offices. Well, this was an old mill, and a huge old mill that they had converted into a restaurant, an event center, and so forth. And we were standing outside getting ready to go in and get a table. And no, I think it was afterwards. And I just, you know, a lot of typical tree-lined street, you know, in front of the big building, you know, where people could drive up and drop off family and so forth. And I looked and I was like, huh. And then I looked and I was like, oh, I know what, because at first I was like, that's different. I'm like, but I'm in Missouri. It's not Minnesota, Tara. And then I looked, I'm like, oh, I know what that is. And I was so excited, you know, as I've worked with Matt and building the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, you know, plants used to be just green things. Oh, that's one with yellow flowers, and that one, you know, has 5 petals, you know. But as I get to know like the names, it's like getting to know a person. It's like, oh, I know that person. And you do in an interesting way, you do kind of build a relationship in a way. And that was just like a passing acquaintance, you know, like, okay, I know that person. I know that tree now. But there are so many things about it. What was it that first came to you, like in your book? What was so healing about it? Wasn't it something about grandparents?
Yeah, so the way that it first came to me, and I do want to say before I begin this, what you said about relationship matters a great deal. So the plant communication that I'm so interested in, it's the part of plants that I love the most. You know, some herbalists like to make tea, some like to make salve, some are interested in the constituents. I'm curious about communicating and talking to them. And this tree I have cultivated and nurtured a relationship with for over a decade. So the depth I feel of medicine and knowing that I have is because of relationship. So when you say this, you know, passing acquaintance or a person, it's just like with a human. Actually, just like it and maybe better. But time is how you get to know them. So instead of just knowing, like when I said before, I'm not going to speak in botanical terms. For me, that's like knowing your eye color, your hair color, and your height. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I know you, like your essence. So I want to be sure and say that. So the way that my relationship with this tree began is it started to get my attention. I suddenly wanted to seek it out. I don't even remember why. I really don't know, except it was meant to be. And also, I feel that we share, I don't know the right word, we share a soul. I don't know if I'll get to all that today. There's writing coming, but like we're one. It was like going home. So I was looking for the tree, and the first one I saw, I thought it was a tulip poplar. I recognized the leaves. They're so recognizable. But the trunk wasn't like straight and tall like I had expected. So I sort of looked at the leaves and then traced back to make sure I got the right trunk, the right tree. And I did. But it had barbed wire embedded in its trunk, and it was like oozing, like it was a wound, a scar. And I opened myself up and, said, hi, like, I've been wanting to meet you. Like, can we have a conversation? And that tree told me it was broken and it was sick and it didn't have any medicine to give me. You could feel it feeling like it was broken and it was worthless and it didn't have anything to offer, and it kind of failed. And it was interesting because, oh gosh, I haven't talked about this in a long time. The place where the barbed wire went through, the tulip poplar, like most trees, it curved and then started to grow straight, right? And it was so much like myself, because I have a little scoliosis, this little curve, and I wasn't born that way. It came later, this little moment of trauma. Matt talks about that with black cohosh, where something becomes twisted, curved, right? And I actually said to the tree, looking back, I'm just thinking this was so funny. I said to the tree, no, you have medicine. Your scar is your medicine. And I started talking to the tree about how its scar was its medicine. And then it started to feel better and offered me its leaves. And in retrospect, what I understand now is that we're reflecting each other. It's like enabling me to talk to myself, right? Like, I'm scarred, I'm wounded, I don't have anything to offer, right? I'm broken. And this idea, no, man, your scar is your medicine, your wound is your medicine. But after that little exchange, it told me to go to the older trees. It was like, you really just need to go to the older trees. It was like, I appreciate this exchange, but you need more. So I walked down, and before I even got there, I felt this other tulip poplar. I felt it, and you've heard this story before, Tara. I stopped, and what I felt, the impression I got, as you know, was impenetrable fortress. That was the impression. Like, this tree wasn't going to talk to me. I wasn't going to be able to step any closer. It was a huge moat, a huge wall, and it was just this immense, mighty being. So I didn't take a step closer. I had that moment with it, left, came back a few weeks later, walked further down the creek, and that's when I had the moment that you described, that I connect to the grandparents, which is actually a phrase that I actually got from Susan Weed in her book. So what happened was, I put one hand on a tulip poplar, and I heard a little voice say, hey, I'm over here. And I look, and there's another tulip poplar, and I put my hand on both of them, and I just wanted to feel them. I just wanted to stand there and feel them. And I don't know why, except our souls know what we need. We're drawn to those things. And suddenly the trees just went straight up. They were so tall, and they started to swing me between them, like the vision, like a little child. And they were laughing, they were looking down at me, and they were delighting in me and happy with me. And we were a family. And then they sat me back down on the ground. And then the first words I heard from like a well tulip poplar was, we will be your parents. And I remember thinking that was so incredibly lovely to have trees offer to be my parents, but I also thought, I have them. Right, kind of. It was such a difference from the impression of the impenetrable fortress. But what I found is that those two experiences, the impenetrable fortress we will be your parents, and the love I felt from them and the acceptance and that brokenness of the wound have just intertwined the last 10 years to become an enormous amount of medicine. And I went home after that, and it was just a few weeks. I really don't remember the time frame. It was, I mean, a couple months at most. That's when I had my first flashback. And I just needed help. I really didn't know what to do. And I've mentioned in past videos about going to body work and energy workers, you know. But I had all these herb books in my house, and I thought, surely somebody wrote something about plants and trauma. And that's 10 years ago. You know, there's still not really anything out there. And I remember picking up Susan Weed's book, Down There. That's what it's titled. And I looked in her content page and just looking for something. And all the way down at the bottom was an entry for trauma. And I turned to that chapter. It's extraordinary. I don't know if anybody has that book. I put a portion of it in my book. She also hears the plants and would like speak for the plants. And it's grandmother and grandfather telling you that, like, we're your parents. This isn't your fault. And it was exactly the image and the feeling I had with Tulip Poplar, but instead of parents, it was grandparents. And I was just sort of stunned. And it was such a confirmation for me at that time that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't crazy with what I was remembering. I wasn't crazy with what I was experiencing. And I've spent the last 10 years or more sort of living my life based off of those kinds of synchronicities. So that's sort of how it began, and those were the first messages and how they started to intertwine with the trauma aspect.
So in all of our podcasts together, we've been talking about plant communication, and the audience that we're speaking to is probably pretty okay with it, but there still might be some newbies to herbalism going, wait, I thought this was just to help me with my allergies, or that's what I was hoping for. What are you talking about? Talking with plants. How do you describe that to someone, or maybe not even describe, but have a conversation?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the time period I'm speaking of, I got myself in a lot of trouble over plant communication. Because I was as you've heard before, a conservative pastor's wife at the time. When I say conservative, no holidays, head coverings, no musical instruments, Sabbath keeping, all of those kinds of things. Very conservative. Some people call it a cult. Possible. And so when I was saying herbalism, I was keeping it a secret, kind of on the quiet, down low. But in herbal circles, there was kind of whispers of plant communication, that you could talk to plants and they could talk to you. So I was curious about it, and ended up getting myself in trouble and thrown out of a Christian group for just asking if anybody wanted to talk about the possibility of that. So the experience that I had with it was basically, I believed it was possible. So it's kind of like Mary Oliver's the poet who says, if you don't believe there are angels, you'll probably never see one, right? So I just believed it was possible, and I opened my heart up to the possibility. So one day I was out weeding my nettles. I was a new herbal student, and I had this little garden, and I ended up really in a meditative state, to be honest. You know, it's just rhythmic. And my husband at the time was out with my kids, so I was alone. It was quiet. And suddenly I just heard it. It just poured, you know, and some of you have heard the story before, just poured through. And I knew in that moment, this is the voice of nettles. And by voice, I don't mean an audible voice. It was like, for me, like intuition, a knowing, just words, for, you know, inspiration. It's all different ways you might describe it. So I ran in and got my notebook and started writing it down. It just poured through, and I ended up taking it to my teacher, Teresa. And I was like, Teresa, guess what? Nettles spoke. And I told her what Nettles had said. And she said, you know, Amanda, go over to that shelf and pull off this book. And it was a children's book, an indigenous story about nettles. I pulled it down. I read this little picture book, and it was exactly what Nettles had said to me, except, you know, a little more poetic and put together. It was extraordinary. And so it was real, right? It's real. So for myself, the way I've experienced it is an openness to the possibility, an open heart. I remember one of my sons now, he's like 19 now, but when he was small, he said, "What do you mean the plants talk to you? Like, do you hear their voice?" And I said to him, "No, I listen with my heart. I hear them with my heart." So everybody's different, but I open my heart. I open myself up to the possibility. And I would just say it's taken some practice, right, to discern my voice and the voice of the plants. And these experiences where Teresa says, take down that book, or I go to Susan Weed's book and read a section, these experiences that confirm for me what I heard, and I can trust what I'm hearing. And so I've just learned to like hone it. It's like learning a different language, or learning how to recognize the voice of a person you like when they call you on the phone. You know, you just start to learn it, and you start to differentiate. And over the years, I've also come to realize that when I say Tulip Poplar says, I'm also saying Amanda says, and I'm also saying the divine voice is saying. Like there's for me, there's an interwovenness of what is real and true, what we think of as intuition, or the still small voice, or some people say the Holy Spirit. I don't know. This is how I experience it, and I've found that it helps to be quiet, it helps to be intentional, and honestly, it just helps to be willing. I feel like the plants are just looking for humans who want to talk to them. And if they know you're open, then in they come. So other people might describe it in different ways and be a little more technical, but that's how I experience it. And so that's what happened to me with Tulip Poplar that day. I'm just willing. I just want to. I'm just here. So, and they had something to say.
That's a lovely way to describe it. I personally want to continue this conversation, but I'm finding, I think that the visual, not being able to see you full, you're pausing a lot. And so I think we'll just leave this as an intro to Tulip Poplar and maybe plant communication. And we'll schedule part 2 for this. We miss a lot without seeing your live face interaction and so forth. I'm going to share here too that Amanda actually teaches plant communication at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism. First, I was going to mention she also co-taught the animal medicines, which is absolutely fascinating. So you'll learn too that how their patterns, their similarities between plants, animals, helping to understand which plants suit a person based upon different types. Anyways, you'll get a nice introduction here at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism. You search in courses, just type in animal medicines. You register for this free intro to animal medicines, and that's just in courses. And you can type in animal, and you'll see this free intro. But also search attunement, and you'll find, and look at that, the lovely Tulip Poplar is representing plant attunement. If this is very curious to you and you'd like to begin and just don't know where to start in this plant communication, I recommend starting here. And as Amanda said, also she'll be starting up what did you call it? I'll go to your website. And what is it that you're starting up in the fall?
Yeah, so in September, the 1st of September, it's the Tulip Poplar Apprenticeship. It's very specific. It's focusing on that plant and just really a transmission as much as I can give over a 6-month period of the medicine I've learned from the tree. Also, though, if people are interested in plant communication, if they're curious, I do have a section. If you go down more, there's intuitive sessions. There's a link at the top that says more, and you can find intuitive sessions there. People are welcome to reach out for a session where we can just choose a plant and sit together and practice. They can have intention, a question, or because sometimes it helps to have someone echoing and being a soundboard and confirming as you're learning to like differentiate and trust what you receive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially when you're beginning,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of unsure. And then the book that I was mentioning is Flowers for a Girl. And you can get this again at Alchemillas, ALCHEMILLAS.com. Flowers for a Girl, Plant Medicine and Sexual Trauma. And I've said before in previous podcasts that I personally found it very helpful for other kinds of trauma. It's very relatable. And like I said, it goes into just enough detail to be able to relate and understand, still very poetic, yet not too much. So it's the baby bear combination. It's just right, just the right amount of each of them. And if you're new to herbs too, it's very understandable and beautiful in that way too. So I'm glad we were able to talk a bit about Tulip Poplar and give it a good start. I just want to make sure that seeing a person, it's not the same as just hearing the story. Especially we can see you. Anyways, I want to give Tulip Poplar and your story, what you have to share. It's full presentation. And so what I think we'll do is we'll just schedule part 2 and get into more of this. But it's a lovely intro to get people started and introduced to Tulip Poplar. How's that sound?
It sounds good. We still don't have any rain. Just rumbles, but yeah.
Well, hopefully it's not all for naught that you get your rain. You said your grass is crunchy, and that's not good.
Yeah, it's awful. Yeah, so we'll just get back together. I just keep gathering it, so I'll just have more to say.
We might have part 3 even.
Yeah, for real.
Who knows? That's okay. I mean, it's absolutely amazing as I've been working in this realm that the plants are like people. Like they're just endlessly interesting if you take the time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Any other closing thoughts from you?
No, just part of what I've learned from Tulip Poplar is patience with the process. So we're going to be patient with this process of sharing the medicine and trust the timing, the divine timing, blue heron medicine of when it's time to strike, when it's time to fish. So just trust it.
Sounds great.
Okay.
So true. And make sure to subscribe at the YouTube channel at Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism. We post these podcasts when they're going to be up ahead of time, so you can schedule to join us live, which is very fun. And you can comment in the comment section. And we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.